Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our semi-regular Tuesday stream. We tend to stream when we can at the moment. We do apologise; it's not been the most consistent schedule.
But of course, on some days we change what we normally do because we have to accommodate some guests.
Yes, we do.
So we are very lucky to have with us Mr. Edward Dutton.
Hello. Good to see you both again.
Yes, I must admit we've kind of had to throw some of the production stuff for this stream together a bit quicker than we thought, so there might not be the usual facial repertoire that Dutton normally performs.
I'll try and get him on screen. Don't worry.
We might have to only go in his vocal intonations.
Nah, I will be getting the StreamYard. It might be a bit hacky because we'll be streaming the back end of the StreamYard, but we will have some. I think we'll figure out how to get some camera time anyway. But we tend to show some source on the stream too. But yes, hello, Professor Edward Dutton. Good to have you on.
Yes, good to. Hello, I've met one of you in person, haven't I? And the other I've only chatted to online a number of times.
Yes.
Yes, that's the situation. Yes, hello, good to see you.
Well, it's sometimes we cannot always be in the same place at the same time because it makes us too powerful.
that's
yes, indeed. Or that one of you is Superman or whatever. But yeah, that's basically it. Yes.
I don't think I'm Superman. You might be secretly a giraffe, Evelyn, but you aren't.
Yeah, but I do the quick change in the phone box or whatever it is. But yes. Well, we're getting started and people are flooding in, hopefully.
Yes.
If you want to support the stuff that we are doing here, other than just being a subscriber or telling us how much you love Al Gore's rhythms in the comments, or professing, as I hope you do too, Dutton, that we love the nation of Israel here.
That's how we keep the stream safe.
That's how we keep the lights on.
That's how we keep things on YouTube, is our undying love for the nation of Israel.
But if you wish to support us, you can either directly via the Ko-Fi, or you can become a member on the YouTube channel, or you can subscribe to the Substack. And we are trying to continue to do things with all of these fronts. So any support is appreciated. But
yes.
We shan't dither, seeing as we've got an important person and only so much of his time.
Oh yes.
I think we might as well just dump right into it, really. What I can sort of understand already straight away from reading the book what some of your motivations for writing the book were.
Yes.
I'm more intrigued really about how did you go from being, I suppose, outside of the sort of Bowden sphere to being able to interview all these people? Because I've always found when someone passes on or leaves these sort of spheres, there tends to be a real trouble that we have with carrying them over and what their lessons they've learned, the things that they've taught us. These things normally seem to pass by the wayside, especially when we get into the nitty-gritty of who is and isn't involved in movements. And there's a lot of murky waters in history that's still really argued about from that period that Bowden was active in the BNP and whatever else was going on. So I sort of wonder how did you go about even sort of ascertaining some of these interviews that you got for the book?
A little bit hacky here, but
it wasn't particularly difficult. I suppose when you say that there's tension or imply that there's tensions and things like that, well, obviously he's been dead since 2012. So I don't know if that renders it easier with regard to any tensions that there were within the BNP. There was someone that supposedly attempted to research. Well, he did do quite a bit of work actually, but then gave up. The biography before I did, called Alex Kurtagic, and he interviewed a number of people whom I interviewed, and they commented on this and how irritated they were that he kind of wasted their time.
Yeah.
And he started in 2012, almost immediately upon Bowden's death. Gathering information. Unfortunately, a guy I interviewed kept all the correspondence, and so I was able to see kind of what he'd done. But no, it wasn't very difficult. I started in 2019 when someone on my live stream suggested that I write the biography of Bowden because I had written a biography of J. Philippe Rushton the previous year. And I thought, okay. And so I looked into it, and I discovered from somebody that the executor of his estate and of all of his literary, and the person to whom was bequeathed all of his literary stuff and everything was a guy called Michael Woodbridge, who so I got in touch with him, elderly man, on Facebook, and he told me that there was someone else writing the biography, and so he couldn't cooperate with me on it. And so then I just sort of gave up on it. And then in 2021, somebody asked about it again, and again we got in touch with this Kurtchik guy, and again he said he claimed to be still writing it, and then nothing. And then, as you know, in the book, I was inspired by this. Well, I suppose I can name her in that she's outed herself on Twitter. This girl, I was at this thing, the Unheard, and there was this. Well, I got talking to this philosopher called Nina Power, and she revealed with a kind of wry smile or sort of undisguised pride on her face her copy of Extremists, which is a book of Jonathan Bowden's speeches, and just smiled at me as if to say, "Hey, look, Ed, look how based I am. I bet you didn't think I had it in me." And that made me think, well, God, if she's into it, and she's kind of semi-respectable, really, then a lot of people must be interested in this Bowden chap, a lot more than I thought, because one of the things that held me back was wondering, well, how popular would the biography be? I haven't got any funding to write this, so I'll be writing it on spec on my own time and whatever, when I could be writing something else. And a light bulb sort of went on over my head. If I'd been a Bugs Bunny or something, or having an idea, and wow, this guy is obviously more popular, has a greater cult following than I thought. And so that was in London in early September or something, literally just after when me and Scrump Monkey met at the conference at Warwick University, just after that, days after that. And then so then I went back to Finland, and then I started immediately. And I first of all spoke to Michael Woodbridge, and then a lot of them would seem to know each other, or they'd know other people, so they could put you in touch with somebody, and then the other person could put you in touch with somebody, and so on. And it just generally kind of snowballed, and so it really wasn't very difficult.
I suppose
to get.
Oh, sorry. I suppose that's at least something somewhat good to hear, is that there wasn't obstinance with this. Maybe it's because, as you say, it's so much.
The obstinacy was first of all from his cousin, who said that it was the family are absolute normies. I've looked into them on Facebook and everything. They're absolute normies, and so obviously you can see that their fate. They didn't come to the funeral either. None of them. His father was very ill. She didn't come. His stepmother, who he didn't get on with, didn't come. None of his three step siblings came. And they didn't want to come to the funeral because they were concerned the far right would turn up, and they didn't want the funeral to be advertised in case the far right turned up.
Right.
Really.
Well,
so eventually, people the far right did just turn up, and that was all that turned up. His friends and colleagues, and so difficult. Adrian Wadley, this cousin of his mother, i.e. Bowden's aunt, had said that she didn't want any. If there ever was a biography of him, she didn't want any cooperation. I suppose Kurtchik had got in touch with her, and he said, "I'll respect that." But eventually he backed down a bit and gave me some information, but he couldn't give me that much information. I mean, how well does one know one's cousin, really, on average? And but he wouldn't give me any family photographs or anything like that, which was annoying. And then there was a few other people that knew Bowden. Troy Southgate, his name was. He wouldn't speak to me. He wrote back, "I don't want to be interviewed." David Oderberg, who's professor of philosophy at Reading University, who was Bowden's friend in the 90s, he wouldn't be interviewed. And then this Jez Bedford Turner, who was in charge of the London Forum, he didn't want to be interviewed. But then otherwise, everybody was very cooperative, and some people were extremely enthusiastic and gave me a great deal of their time, went to a great deal of effort to find old emails on old hard drives and all kinds of stuff. So in general, I found people to be very helpful.
Yeah, so no, I was just going to add the fact that I wonder if that is a consequence, as you said, of it being sort of so long after his death now, that people maybe are actually keen to talk about it to some extent, because now they know that he is this kind of
cult figure now.
Yeah, this kind of internet phenomenon in this kind of weird sphere. I noticed as well, I think you had mentioned it somewhere on Twitter, discussing with someone that Kurtchik, or however you ever pronounce it, actually, or at least supposedly, has access to Bowden's diary. Now,
all I know is that he. Some people have mentioned to me this. So it seems he kept a diary.
Yes.
And or at least in certain periods. These were given to Kurtchik by Michael Woodbridge on the understanding he would write a biography, and he hasn't written the biography, and he won't give them back.
Yes, because I find, I mean, I suppose I should have expected it really, but your sort of psychological analysis, if that's the correct word, that you've sort of engaged with on Bowden there from what you've got, it's quite interesting, and it opens up a lot of things to question, not necessarily about him, but the people around him and where he was placed. And I think if that diary, and if anyone had access to that, I think you could really go right down into his sort of psyche there. But I think even more so that might probably arise the ire of certain people, because they maybe just don't want him to be investigated like that. And I can understand why. On you go.
Sorry.
No, on you go.
No, well, so I was going to say a number of things. So, firstly, on the one hand, I think, yeah, you're right. It's a long time ago, and so people have calmed down and forgiven and whatever. And so he was very nasty about Nick Griffin, for example, was Jonathan Bowden. But Nick Griffin didn't care. You know, he was prepared to talk to me and was quite even-handed about Bowden, as far as I can see. And that was true of many other people in the BNP. So you've got that element to it, that it's a long time ago and things have calmed down. But on the other hand, you do get this. People kind of go through a phase of being in what you might call the far right. And then sometimes as they get older, they regret it. And they think to themselves, oh, well, if only I hadn't done that, then I would have earned more money. If only I hadn't done that, I would have had higher social status. If only I hadn't done that, X, Y, Z wouldn't have happened. And so they kind of blame their time in the far right on this, and they want to forget about it. And so actually they become perhaps less likely to want to be interviewed over time, depending on their situation. So, for example, Troy Southgate gave an interview just after Bowden died to a Portuguese researcher on the far right about Bowden, but then now he doesn't want to do so. And there were other people like that were they want to just put it behind them, this period of their lives. They perhaps see it as a mistake, essentially, and they don't want to have it raked up again.
What do you think is behind Bowden's revival into this cult figure? Because at the time, I heard very, very little about Jonathan Bowden, despite the BNP being quite active in this area. I actually did hear the name. He was mentioned as someone who was involved in it, but it was never somebody who was a particularly large figure. I remember people talking about Nick Griffin and there being local chapters of the party where people would come and speak. I know that he spoke quite locally here in somewhere like Wigan, in the northwest of England in general, but it's a point that he was not a figure who was well remembered. He's been reinvented somewhat by the internet. I know there's the Jonathan Bowden archive and things like that, which people use. But what do you think is most responsible for his reinvention into this almost mythical right-wing figure?
Yeah, I think it's two key things. On top of the fact that he did have a natural charisma and so forth, and he was very good orator. He was almost a mesmeric orator, you know, the mediumistic orator that would do these incredible speeches. He could bring together. He's obviously very intelligent and knowledgeable, and could bring together all kinds of different strands of thought and distill their essence. He could make a cold world feel warm again for people on the right who were in the room, and persuade them that through the sheer power of his conviction and confidence that clown world would finish up, would be killed off in the end. So he had all those dimensions of charisma. Other things as well, there's research indicating that charismatics often have what's called an identifiable flaw, which makes you more able to bond with them. In his case, he was short and fat. And also, although he lied about this, but utterly impoverished. So there's all these things about him that are charismatic. But I think the two key things about him, well, firstly, is that he died. He died young, and he died suddenly. And there are a number of studies on the psychology of charisma that indicate that is a key element to someone becoming, as it were, sacralized.
It's like his James Dean moment.
Yes, it is. It's very much. It's the Kurt Cobain effect. It's very, because I know you mentioned it in the book as well, and thank you for the shout out with that. But the idea of Jonathan Bowden, I always thought even more as like an artist, an outsider artist or musician. In that a lot of people say that you can't listen to Bowden because he was a liar, he was a fantasist, he was a bad person, but. No, you know, the boomers don't really care that John Lennon beat up women. They think of him as an artist. And that's more of how I think of Bowden as a figure. He could be quite unpleasant as a person, apparently. Some people say that. I don't know, as you said off air, that people would be annoyed that you'd speak a bit ill of him, but you have to give a true account of the man. And the man was really a very far off pieced in terms of what you expect from somebody in Britain at that time.
or ever. I mean, he was a very eccentric individual, and there was a degree to which that's attractive, and it's part of his charisma because it means he comes across as, even though he was a liar, he comes across in a strange way as genuine, precisely because he's, in a way, Boris does to a lesser extent. Because he's eccentric, because he's unusual, because he doesn't fit within the normal boundaries of behaviour, but not to an offensive degree, then this comes across as genuine, and this is attractive to people. With what you said about art, this is another thing. So it's eclectic. He takes risks. He does this art. Some of it's quite good, some of it's not very good. He writes these books. Some of them are good, some of them aren't very good. But the point is that he takes risks. There's something genuine about that and flawed about that. But the key thing is that if you die, and if you die suddenly, and if you die young, then this kind of there's quantitative research on this that I look at in the book. This seems to imbue you with greater charisma, and it allows people to project the qualities of the community of which you were part onto you, and you seem to embody that community to a greater extent, precisely because you have died, and therefore you are a canvas for everything to be projected onto, in the same way that the Queen was, or whatever. But also that you seem to be a kind of martyr for the community. You have made the ultimate sacrifice somehow for the community by being so focused on inspiring it or whatever that you've neglected everything else and you've died. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is simply that he died when he did. If he'd have been knocking around like John Tyndall or someone in the 70s, you'd have a few videos of his speeches and on VHS, and hardly anyone would watch them. How would you get hold of them? How would you watch them? You couldn't. And then you'd gradually become less relevant. You'd be forgotten about. But he died just at the time that social media and YouTube and whatever was just at that time when it was on the rise. And so people were able to get these videos of his speeches. Some of them just recordings, some of them video recordings, and they themselves have this charismatic, genuine quality to them because they're quite amateurish. This idea, it's just a bunch of people above a pub.
It's like watching like an old family get together, or your granddad's 80th or something. Yeah,
exactly.
One thing I noted towards the end as well, I believe we've got a bit of a quote from, is it Sid Bookmaker or whatever his name is, something to that extent. He's the one that states at the end of one of the chapters that it's his belief that Bowden nowadays, if he was alive, would be even more popular than he is now. And that he would, in some way, and that, I don't want to insult the gentleman because he's obviously helped you with your book and whatever else, and he's probably very clever, but he seems to have this idea that Bowden would have helped us all. That he would have been some sort of idol, and the momentum around him would have had to have led to something happening, which I'm not entirely sure I get.
No, I'm not sure about that. I can see his point in so much. I think that what I argue in the book, for those that say I'm slagging him off, is that Bowden was basically a genius. He was an oratorical genius. The nearest comparison I can think of, I don't mean this in terms of character or anything, but he's basically Hitler. In so much as Hitler wrote books that weren't very good, did art that weren't very well written, that did art that was all right, but eventually he found his passion, and that was public speaking. And that was his. But he arrived at a different time, and so he ended up being a charismatic leader for a much larger community than Bowden did. And so I think in that sense, the comparison works. Now, people like that need to be managed.
Yes, this is where I was going. Yeah.
Bowden himself said, he said a lot of very perceptive remarks that related to himself. Geniuses are like special needs, but the other way around.
Yeah.
In that he said that nature is fair in its unfairness, in that people that have amazing, fantastic qualities that make them supermen in one area of life are often completely hopeless at everyday tasks. And he said that in the Q&A after his Punch and Judy discussion, it might have been.
Yeah.
And I think that he must have understood he was talking about himself. He was talking about himself, and he must have known he was talking about himself.
Yeah, we have that as a short on this YouTube channel, actually.
Yes.
It was such a good... And it is. It's almost like he's looking into the camera a little bit. The fact that he's dead makes some of his words quite ironic, because he was... If you understand the man a bit... there's certain things that everyone will say that we know is true about Bowden in the way that he behaved and the way you seem to think. And if you understand a bit about him and you listen to his speeches now, some of it is, you know, a little bit on the nose in terms of himself as well. But I think that especially his, you know, he says that it's not often recognised in its time. It's usually recognised after it's dead, which really just...
They're uncooperative people. They're difficult people. I mean, he must have known, he must have been self-aware enough, I think, to understand that there was a degree to which he was talking about himself. And so... and that is true. And so, as a consequence, these kinds of people need management. They need the kind of person who is organised, who is interested in money, who has a very different skill set from them, in order to help them out and in order to allow them to reach their full potential. And maybe if he didn't really have that. He had that to some extent. He had people that would drive him to and from places because he couldn't drive, or let him stay at their place when he had a breakdown or whatever. But he didn't have someone who really saw the potential and thought he was great.
There was no SS for him, basically.
Well, not the SS, but there were certain figures within Germany that recognised Hitler's potential and kind of moulded him. So, but I think by the end of his life, there was a degree to which maybe he was getting that, and there were people in America like Greg Johnson or Jared Taylor that recognised him and started thinking to themselves, "Oh, if we could just get this guy kitted out with a proper studio and he could be kind of managed and given a salary somehow." So there's that. Now, of course, he was a pathological liar, so he would be very difficult to work with. And so you'd really have to bend over backwards, I imagine, to work with him. So you raised an interesting question, whichever one of you was that said it. Would he be, is it not perhaps likely that had he lived, then... And had he become more prominent because of the internet, then all kinds of peculiar things would have come out. He would have behaved oddly. There would have been things that would have gone wrong.
Yes, I think he would have. He would have destroyed his own legacy.
You don't want to have unlimited 24-hour access to Jonathan Bowden.
No,
he's a bit much for that. And we see it with quote unquote e-celebrities all the time. He might have ended up as an almost like a Destiny figure. He becomes like a joke. And I think the internet is very good at making these kind of people into a joke.
Yeah, it's better...
Or Nick Fuentes.
It's better that he be a genuine tragedy as opposed to some sort of sad living clown.
Yeah.
That's very well. It's extremely well put. Yeah, that's a level of perspicacity that Bowden himself could rival. Yeah, that's exactly it. But better that he's a dead tragedy than a living clown, precisely. And I don't know what way it would go. It's just speculation, but one suspects that you can imagine him going too far and getting chucked off YouTube. You can imagine all kinds. How would he react to the pandemic? All kinds of things like that. But we'll never. So I think I don't think he would. It's questionable whether he would be a kind of base Jordan Peterson had he lived.
Yes,
it's the fact. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's good that he died at 49. It's tragic, obviously, but I think it is a big part of what has cemented his charisma, combined with the fact that he died at just that point where you have this young generation of people that were only children or whatever when he died, that are then exposed. He's so memeable, as you have done yourselves. He's so memeable. He's so that it spreads. To make a hyperbolic comparison, like the stories about Jesus or something, it spreads. If Jesus hadn't been crucified at 30, would he be as charismatic?
Yeah.
No.
Would Mishima be the man he is without what he did? No, probably not.
Certainly not.
On a slightly different topic of conversation, though, in reading the book and basically seeing you describe a man who I think in many ways is actually in conflict with himself, I'm reminded of a bit from Nicolas de Gomez Davila that I picked out the other week and sent to someone. Nobody finds himself by searching merely for himself. Personality is born out of conflict with a norm. Now, I think in a bizarre way, that might as well have been a statement written about Bowden. And without making it too personal for my own regards, I really appreciate him more in a certain respect, knowing that he wasn't the prototypical right-winger. He was not the ideal that even he aspired to. And for myself, it's quite sort of, I don't know, encouraging almost that someone could garner that level of prominence and be personally known, at least on some level, as someone who has these sort of conflicts within themselves, and is opposed, at maybe their own lifestyle or just the manner that they compose themselves, to maybe the views that they espouse. But this doesn't.
Well, some people would call that a hypocrite.
Yes, but
I think that it's key. It's key to and I look at this in the book in some detail. It's key to understanding charisma, because yes, he has produced with the speeches and so on this spellbinding oratorical charisma. And what produces that? What is it that allows you to have the self-confidence to do that? What is it that allows you to go into almost a trance-like state, which then brings the audience into a trance-like state, such that you can turn the tears and turn the laughter and all this kind of thing? What is it that allows you to have the verbal dexterity to make all of these witty remarks and all this kind of thing? It's this optimally balanced bundle of traits, which can be summarized to some extent as sort of narcissism, really, as a kind of not necessarily borderline narcissistic personality disorder, but certainly as subclinical narcissism, which itself does relate, because it's a response to high neuroticism and stress, to developing paranoid schizophrenia, not schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia, and so you can see. And then what is it that narcissists are prone to? Well, they're prone to lying, and they're prone to exaggerating, and they're prone to self-aggrandizement, and they're prone to and then of course the nature of the genius is such that you often have outlier high intelligence, which makes you crap at things that because of the Spearman's law of diminishing returns, that are at the base of the intelligence pyramid, that are perfectly fine for ordinary people, like driving a car or being able to make money or whatever. And so you can see how therefore it's this ironically the very people that inspire the foot soldiers will almost certainly be highly flawed, and in that sense hypocrites, or in that sense in conflict with themselves. So we really, as I try to stress to these people that want to say, oh, you're just slagging off Bowden. No, that is the nature of the charismatic. If Bowden is a charismatic, amazing chap, which he is, it seems to me that he is on a number of levels, then you would expect him concomitantly, or indeed just as part of that, to be deeply, deeply flawed, and as you say, in conflict with himself, to be basically highly mentally unstable, essentially.
Yes, I think if he was a 6'2" scrum half, who could run a Bitcoin trading platform and be a successful multi-billionaire, he wouldn't be Jonathan Bowden.
Yeah, and had a family, and actually did have a family.
Yes, he would be something else, and that is what I think you're trying to get across, is that you've got to take it all as one.
Somebody was saying to me today, a chap I correspond with, and he was on my channel, an interesting guy, and he was saying, who do you think is anybody that you can compare in the modern world to Jonathan Bowden? Do you think Nima Parvini is the new Jonathan Bowden, he said. And I said, well, no. And also some people have remarked that I'm a bit like Jonathan Bowden in some respects. I don't know why they think that, but anyway, no. We're much more normal and adaptive. You know, me and Nima, we're married and have kids and a house and stuff. I mean, we're quite. That's what Bowden's not about. Bowden's not about that. Bowden lived in a caravan that was falling apart and had absolutely no money and never worked and never had a relationship and never had kids and had a fantasy marriage with 5 children. So if you're going to talk about a new Jonathan Bowden, they have to be rather more like that. I mean, really, really peculiar. And a failure in a lot of areas of life, but a great success in one very narrow one.
It's I don't have the Jonathan Bowden experience, because I'm in real life I have quite a boring engineering job. Really, I'm a technical specialist in a niche area, and I've been that way for quite a long time. You've got to be. He is somebody whose stability was so subnormal, but the heights that he got was so abnormally good. And a lot of people who take issue with him personally. They take issue with him ideologically, but those who will engage with his material properly, and the best things he did, I know there's some stuff that he did. The famous one that I know you talk about the book is the one where he rips off an interview of Bill Hopkins from somebody. But the actual material he creates, when he stands there and speaks without notes, what comes out of his mouth, much of it is irrefutable observation of reality and retelling of historically, apart from some silly quibbling, mostly historical fact, or at least he tells an extremely good historical narrative in many cases. It's well researched, it's engaging, it's got pace to it. I've never seen anybody take issue really with one of Bowden's speeches and try and pick it apart in the way that people do with other things. It would be almost impossible in certain cases, I think, to try and pick some of that stuff apart because it is so crushingly articulate in many ways, and that's what that is magic.
He does sometimes. If you really read his speeches, he does go off on tangents and things like that.
Oh, he
but
does.
That doesn't
yes.
matter because it is made to be listened to, not to be read, and so you can't analyze something as a speech and when it's written down. I think that many of the speeches were superb, and even if he was just off the, I mean, he told Adrian Davis, who was his good friend, when he did what was apparently the best speech he ever did, which was in America in 2009, that he didn't know what he was going to talk about till he got up there. He said, "What are you going to talk about?" He's doing this speech at the Occidental Quarterly Conference, big chance in America, and he just says, "I don't know, I'll just start talking and see what happens."
Yes, I think
yes.
I don't know if you would agree with this, but I think it fairer to suggest that he isn't so much a creative. I know he created things off his own back, and some of that stuff is interesting in of itself. But I think he's really best understood as a translator or a communicator. I think almost to get right back to the idea that sort of you are writing this in mind of him being a shaman. He is taking and plucking things out of the ether, be they spirits or ideals or principles or hierarchies that are not for us to see. And
Shaman is a good word. It's very
he clearly saw these things, could translate them to us, and in some respect, maybe even help some of us normies see these things.
Yes, I think that's right. I think he was basically an influencer before the concept of influencer had become so well known. And I look at this, I don't think he had a philosophy. What was that philosophy? I mean, essentially, it was a Nietzschean philosophy combined with that, which you could say is combined, it seems to me, with aspects of perennialism that others disagree. But he does talk about things, certain truths being eternal, certain things outside us being absolute. But on the other hand, he talks about being influenced by Heraclitus and this idea that everything merges into everything else, and so on. But there's nothing amazingly original about the philosophy. To a great extent, it's Nietzschean philosophy mixed with certain pagan influences and perhaps certain perennialist ideas. There's nothing amazingly original really about his paintings. It's heavily influenced by Wyndham Lewis and vorticism, whatever it's called, by modernists of various kinds. It's quite interesting that he's not saying throw modernism out. He's saying just make modernism more based, essentially. And in terms of his writing, you can influence of sort of Max Stirner, Nietzsche, that sort of thing. There's nothing particularly original about it. It's what he's able to do is this eclectic ability to bring lots of, like a good teacher really, to bring lots of information together and to distill it into something that you are able to that allows you to understand something really quite complicated. And even if you're not particularly educated in the area, and also, of course, he's just able to take you on an emotional ride. That was the essence, I think, of his thing. So people have talked about how wouldn't it be good if I'd looked in the book in more detail at Bowden's philosophy? Well, what philosophy? I mean, there was no philosophy, as far as I can see, that was particularly original to him. So I didn't feel the need to look at it in more than a few pages. Likewise, his art. I mean, it was no major. I don't think it was a major contribution. I've seen all of his paintings. I'm just not that impressed. What's impressive is the facts of his eclecticism, the fact of his different abilities, although they might not have been that amazing in different things. And it comes together in the speeches. That's his triumph. And what these are about is about distilling very complicated things in a way that you understand and you find exciting and you find amazing, and also in sort of bringing a life to life a kind of based British tradition and smuggling past the white blood cells of British empiricism some quite European and idealist sort of ideas. And I think that's kind of what he's done. And the fact that he died so young then turns this into a sort of almost pseudo semi-religious thing,
And
where he.
I think as well, obviously part of your kind of inspiration for writing the book itself is the fact that he's become not just a celebrity in our little circle of online people who post silly frogs and we do our thing, and it happens outside of the rest of the world. What you have is partly because Bowden bumped into that world, and also I think because his ability to translate these ideas has given them such a wide appeal that sort of these edge of the Tory sort of sphere and lots of different other people are not necessarily trying to claim, I think, his lineage.
But they're aware of it at least.
Yes. I mean, that's maybe a different thing we can get at to in a moment. But there is certainly, at least, as you say, this sort of idea of people who are just on the fringes of the mainstream, who are maybe titillated.
Yes.
Or feel like it's almost like it's like some sort of dirty porn mag that they've got because they get to read a little bit of Bowden.
The metaphor I used wasn't dirty porn mag; it was the secret shot of whiskey enjoyed by the overtly godly church lady. But yes. Okay, yeah, maybe that's a better metaphor. That I should have put that on the first page of my book. They're titillated by the dirty porn mag of Jonathan Bowden.
It is naughty though. Yes, he's got naughty beliefs.
But it goes to show that they're not just interested in turning around and going, he's a Nazi, he smells. It's actually about trying to talk about and frame him in a way that steers people like us around. Because ultimately they want to engage in the discussion about him. Because I'm sure, even if you're some sort of Tory party adjacent person or reform adjacent person, there's still stuff in Bowden that you can latch onto without maybe having to get rid of all of your liberal or sort of boomer kind of priors.
No, I mean, Nina Power said that the reason she bought that book was mainly because she wanted to read the chapter on Thomas Carlyle. So she obviously felt that this was a particularly interesting summary of Tom. Maybe she'd heard a bit of the speech. Is it online? I don't know. This was a particularly interesting summary of the philosophy of Thomas Carlyle. So yeah, there is that edginess to it, and I think that's something that's growing even within the last few years, and because of a coming of age into their 20s and so on of Zoomers who have been brought up not by the church lady type thing like we were, but by the nutcases, by the crazy blue-haired weirdos. The whole idea of being right-wing and being based has gone from being totally out there unacceptable to being edgy, and that's the first. I think that's the first thing we're seeing. That's why more women are involved increasingly, as far as I can see, because they consent. They don't want to take that much of a risk. They want to get in there ahead of the game, as I said in the book, and get better returns, on the future powerful men. It implies that the wind is moving a certain way. But secondly, there is something about it that is edgy, not as edgy as, I don't know, listening to the speeches of, not as going too far, like listening to the speeches of Oswald Mosley or something, but it's optimally edgy.
Well, it's the Monday Club, not English Mystery. It's G.K. Chesterton, not A.K. Chesterton. If that's
all right, yeah, but
if you kind of get where I'm going there.
Yeah, I see. It's a sort of a much more fun and lively version of GK. Yeah, it's on that border of where edgy meets taboo, and that's quite a sort of a semi-dangerous, but also not too dangerous. It's a kind of a quite exciting but not dangerous. It's a sort of optimum in a way place to be. And so it's attractive to certain kinds of people, and it does mean that people that are what I call purple pilled, the kind of people that know the truth really, but wouldn't go there in public, or wouldn't go there unless they were drunk. Purple like that bloody magazine that, what was it called, that Unheard, those kinds of people.
Who is it for?
The purple pill, the purple pilled people. So, or indeed, someone like the reform type people, or in the. I mean, I spoke to Michael Gove about this, and Michael Gove knew him and liked him, or at least respected him. And Michael Gove, of course, ran this review of my book in the Spectator. So it's showing you just how high up people are kind of grudgingly respect this guy. So it's this is what he's managed. It's quite an achievement. And again, I think part of it is what he's saying, but part of it is just this cult, which is spread by word of mouth or word of internet chat room or whatever, word of social media, which is built up around him. And yes, he was very talented, but I stress that a significant dimension of it is his death. It just is. And it sanctifies him in the same way that you mentioned John Lennon or anybody else like that. If they die young, or Amy Winehouse, whatever her name is.
It is very strange seeing Jonathan Bowden in The Spectator, though. It's like when they ran the Alexander Dugin interview.
He said at that Q&A, "Oh, they know about me, but they won't write about me in The Spectator." And that's happened.
There's almost this self-fulfilling prophecy in that Jonathan Bowden seems to me a symptom of the fact that nobody really has any ideas on the right, or at least not the mainstream right, in quotes. If you look at the Tory sphere and the Konstantin Kissins of this world and people like that, and those on the edges of reform, they do not have any ideas. They are recycling the exact same talking points, the same kind of, I didn't leave the left left me stuff. And Jonathan Bowden's a world apart from that. It is so much more raw to people, you're right, so much more titillating to people. And it's so strange that someone like The Spectator, an outlet like The Spectator, has to talk about, or at least feel they have to talk about Jonathan Bowden now. And it's so strange.
Even they said to me, I won't name who, but the people involved in The Spectator said to me that got in touch and said, we're going to run this article and we will have to slag you off a bit. So don't take it personally, don't take offense, but the position we're in is we will have to do that.
It's weird because
we don't necessarily think bad things about you, but we will have to say some slightly negative things about you because this is just that's the situation we're in. That's what they said.
It's almost like the slagging off of people is phoned in these days. I noticed that with like Hope Not Hate and things like that, but their reports seem very unenthusiastic. It seems like the machine of the left and the centre right is almost running out of bile. That they've almost talked themselves into a corner where they've been blasting the fact that these people are literally Hitler since really the 1950s, and people have heard these things their entire lives. And it's not that they feel they have to promote Jonathan Bowden. It's just that, well, what are they going to talk about that energizes people?
They're using Jonathan Bowden to promote themselves.
Yes, that's what I mean.
This is the thing I was going to go on to next.
Yeah.
And I shan't name names of people or organisations or anything, but what I do see a lot of nowadays is people, as you say, trying to use Bowden and his ability to translate intellectual and academic subjects as a way to make up for, I think, some of the lacking capacity they may have in their own organisations. And what we end up with really is Bowden becoming. I mean, I'm gonna use my magic orb, and I'm gonna view into the future of a different possible reality, where Bowden actually becomes this sad, tired symbol that we look at when we realise a movement isn't serious, because instead of having its own people, it's put him there.
There does seem to be a little bit of, Bowden bandwagging.
Yes.
You used to get that in Eastern Europe, I think, didn't you? That you'd have a political party that would be named after some dead person that they idolised.
Yes.
I don't think anyone would go to the extent of having the Bowden party. God forbid, I hope no one even thinks of that idea. But more so that I don't think... Now, it's obviously me giving my opinion and my interpretation here, but I don't think he would be happy knowing that his legacy went on to support a bunch of populist and electoral sort of strategies that really went nowhere.
Or it was seen as a series of interesting lectures, was watered down, and nothing really came of it. It would be. Well, it's almost sad to see him in The Spectator because he's such a radical.
I suppose you get that with a lot of people, don't you? I mean, you get that with Martin Luther King. Well, if you get people on the right now taking out of context clips from Martin Luther King speeches and saying, "Oh, I agree with that," or you get that with Margaret Thatcher. Anything that you can kind of meme like that, and you attach yourself to it, and in doing so, you attach yourself to something powerful or something that's considered brave. These people, they didn't take anything that would do that. They weren't capable of taking anything like the risks that Martin Luther King or Margaret Thatcher took. Martin Luther King was assassinated, for God's sake.
Yeah, I mean, I've just seen someone in chat make a fantastic point, which is how
I can't see the chat. I can't see the chat
I know,
on YouTube or
which is-
on.
You can't see the chat on YouTube.
why I'm trying to repeat it back to you here.
All right.
But just the general notion of if people were walking around with sort of Bowden drawings that looked like Che Guevara t-shirts, I think we would think about it all very differently.
But there are people that have done that. There are a number of people on Twitter that have accounts and Facebook that have accounts where they have Bowden's face and
but
with various
it's
artistic
not-
things added.
It's not eye-roll inducing in the way that a sort of trite and played-out reference to Pinochet and throwing communists at a helicopter
Or even
feels.
Trump, really. Trump's become almost kitsch. He's become
Yes.
quite tired.
I mean, that would anything be my worry. It's not so much that Bowden's legacy grows or shrinks, that it gets tarnished because it gets used for the wrong thing, and we all end up having a bit of a nasty aftertaste in our mouth when we think about him.
It's like America with Ronald Reagan. You don't want Jonathan Bowden to become the Ronald Reagan of the quote-unquote UK dissident right. That would be a very poor use of his legacy.
I know, I see that. There are some comments now. Oh, okay, right, yeah. Someone called Mosley's Tash and someone called Natman Prime and someone called Brian E. Yes,
yeah.
talking about Bowden merch. But I can't see them on the StreamYard at all. Anyway, yeah, it's that would be quite annoying. I mean, I found it fascinating that they named a road after him in Reading. They obviously didn't know anything about him. They couldn't have known that he was connected to the British
I'm
National.
not sure. Surely to some extent he must have been a little bit of a kind of local, not celebrity, but rumour. You know, the strange man that lives in the caravan, who every once in a while has an argument with one of his foreign neighbours, and that one time he was seen outside in his street half-dressed with a samurai sword. There's got to be at least some level of local.
The Labour-controlled Birmingham City Council. I mean, I don't know. Would they? I think I didn't want to. I was thinking of getting in touch with the council and asking how this happened, but I didn't want them to
Remove it.
Yeah. That's the worry, isn't it?
Don't look into it. Don't mention it. But I also thought about not even mentioning it in the book, and I did it. It was just a few lines. But then, of course, in the Spectator, Demian Thompson found this fascinating and drew attention to it. And I was concerned about that, but I don't suppose they will. But what you were saying, I thought was interesting earlier about the response of the far left. I mean, I think that's a broader issue. They have been. I think there is a degree to which we are seeing a backlash, and there's a number of markers of this. Not a total, not yet. It hasn't really gathered steam yet, but I think it is starting. And you're seeing this with Trump. So Trump comes in, Trump wins the election. They throw everything at him: you're racist, you're Nazi, you're evil. And if they were telling the truth and genuinely meant what they were saying, then of course they'd be on the streets. They'd be blowing themselves up to try and stop this guy, but they're not, because they're liars and they're virtue signalers and they're cowards. And they do everything they can. They even try to assassinate him, and then it still doesn't work, and he gets elected with the nearest thing you can really get to a landslide in American politics at the moment, i.e. he wins all of the swing states. And then you have the DEI shown up for what it is in the most visceral way by those fires in Los Angeles, and then in he comes, and he's learned from his first time around, and off he goes. And of course, if America sneezes, the world catches a cold, and so gradually it will start to move over to other places. And people have just had enough, and I think can sense, because we're pack animals, we can sense when it's time for your level of bravery, as it were, for you to make a move, and you make the risk reward calculation of what you can get out of making a move at this point as opposed to at this point. Do you ride the crest of the wave and risk being crushed by it, or do you like Nigel Farage? You always slightly behind the wave and cautious, and because it's all about money. I don't know. And people are sensing and understanding, as happens with the herd, that there are other people on their side. There are other people that will back them up. There's some sense in which a line has been crossed and people have had enough and other people have had enough, and you just know it. and then the herd starts to move in a more group-oriented, for example, direction, and it's safer. Not safe, but safer. And I think that they're realizing that. They've gone as far as they can. You can't get any further than saying that men are women and women are men, and making other people say it, and they get fired if they don't, and having women or men in women's sport. You can't go further than that level. How can you go further other than paedophilia, which perhaps they would do? And so then finally you have a reaction, and I think the left are just stunned by it because, hang on, no, you're not. It's like a narcissistic relationship where the codependent is pushed over the border and goes mad, and the narcissist just doesn't know what to do. Just shocked. Just shocked. Just go into shock.
It seems like they're led by the leftists at the moment. Seem to be the comedy gag. I've always studying the left and how they work and what they do, they are always so tightly controlled. They have very little to trouble the power center relay. And that's why it's interesting with Jonathan Bowden that he is somebody who did, at least while he was alive, seem to scare people. A lot of what he said and what he believed in the time period with the BNP and with everything that was going on in Britain was genuinely considered quite dangerous. People were, one, worried about the BNP, and two, worried about Bowden's presence in it. It was dangerous.
Yeah. It was dangerous being in the BNP, though. I mean, you could get physically assaulted by it was much more things were much less internet based back then.
Yes,
and much more in real life. So you could get in serious trouble. You could certainly lose your job. They leaked the membership list, and people lost their job because of that. It's disgraceful. So yeah, it was a dangerous thing to do. Really dangerous thing to do, to be involved in a way that being online tweeting under a false name is not so much.
Do you think that's a bit of an indictment, really, of, I guess, the kind of people who've picked up Bowden? And it does seem to be a figure of people who would never go as far as Bowden, in that they would never stand up in front of a room of people and declare things. The kind of the abstraction, memification of Bowden it does bleed away some of his radical tendencies. It makes him more of a two-dimensional symbol than a person. What we appreciate about the book is, and the picture you paint him as, a man, a flawed man, obviously a very flawed man, but you paint him as somebody in 3 dimensions. He's not a symbol.
He's not a pseudonym.
He's not a meme. He's a man who is an exceptional orator. And I think as down the line as some parts of it are, I really enjoyed your, interviewing and going around and getting who you could. And I want to ask, we're coming towards the end here-ish. We've got about maybe 10 minutes-ish to go. But what is your favourite anecdote you heard about Bowden then? What's your favourite kind of slice of Bowden?
I like the idea that he lived in a caravan and he only had a shower there, and he was at Eddie Butler's house, and I think it was Eddie Butler's house, and he went out. The implication being he's gone for a wee, and he'd been gone for ages, and Eddie found him upstairs having a bath.
That's great.
I think
that's brilliant.
I think there's the other one as well that's mentioned, and I think that's also the one that's mentioned in Adrian Davies' eulogy speech, I think he gave years and years ago, or about the whole they'd got a bed and breakfast room for him, and he's on the phone sort of booking this or something, and then it turns out someone else had actually got him a room somewhere nicer to speak and do whatever else. So he phones the old couple that own this Airbnb up and starts screaming down the phone, "Oh, we're not going to your bed and breakfast because it's terrible, and we've accepted a better offer."
Apparently, he just said, Eddie told me that he just said, "No, we just found somewhere better." and then this old couple couldn't believe it and wrote a letter to Eddie saying, "Well, we've always got very good reviews. What's wrong with our bed and breakfast?" And he was very witty, obviously very clever, apparently just brilliant company, just so funny. That apparently he'd start off, and this is kind of an autistic trait, he'd start off slowly and be a bit nervous at first, but then once he got going, apparently, then basically just everything he said would be funny. And he would hold court, and he would just constantly making people laugh. He was amazingly witty by all accounts. And this is something that got better with time as well, though. So when he was young, when he was at school, then he was very quiet, hardly ever talked to anybody. But if you could get him out of his shell, then he would be extremely funny. but he rarely spoke to anybody, and it moves from that to his confidence growing to speak to people and so forth, and then him entertaining whole crowds, whole rooms. The BNP used to run this red, white, and blue festival, and he was what everyone was there for, to be made to crack up by him, and also an excellent actor as well. He was involved in plays, he wrote plays, and his performance of Beowulf is quite superb. So, I mean, Damien Thompson summarised to me that he was just such an unforgettable person. I think that's despite whatever flaws he may have had, and I think that's evidently true. He was so talented in these various areas, so good at certain, so brilliant at certain things.
I would almost, I don't know, I'll probably never meet one Damien Thompson in my life, nor do I really sort of intend to in any great degree. But I would almost presume, in a weird way, that he sits there and considers himself the fact that he basically went to school with Hitler. In a weird way. I don't really know, I don't have other really words to describe it, because he is that sort of evocative and that particular and totalizing, and just, you know, just a personality that you cannot entirely absorb. You will be absorbed within him. For him to watch him be this quiet child, to then be the man he became, and be one of the few people I think that was at least in close proximity through a reasonable length of that, it must be quite strange for him to be. He's sitting there still as this little spectator writer that no one knows, whereas Bowden has become a phenom. I mean, it's like he's a pop band or it's a cultural
he's
phenomenon.
Like an extremely successful independent artist.
It's not even something of interest or of academic study. It's something you've got to be part of, like the hippie movement.
The energy there, I think, is part of it too.
No, I'm just looking at the chat. I'm just fascinated that you've got one of these silly Bowden worshipper trolls even in your chat now.
Oh, of course.
So this idea that you can't and shouldn't write a biography of an important person, you should just worship them.
It's very odd because
I can't understand that, and the kindest thing I can wish that person is an early death.
Well, that is
absurd way to see the world.
I must admit that appears to be the general function of most people when it comes to politics, is that they burn bridges with you because you said something about someone they like, and that's really mean. No, don't do that.
It's unreal. I don't understand the idea.
People that could have said Dutton. No, just silly, unpleasant people. I'm going to write an article about it tomorrow. It's fascinating. I don't understand that reaction. The idea that why would you not want to research or read a biography of an important person? Why would you prefer that no one's perfect, everybody lies. It's just a question of extent. On average, we all tell 3 lies a day. He just told more. And I've said, it's a psychology I find so hard to get my head around, that you don't want to know the truth. You would rather live in a world of comforting lies and appeal to motive with regard to those that want to know the truth, engage in a fallacious appeal to motive and whatever. I don't understand. Why would you not want to know the truth?
I think we are the outliers there. That I would take as the sort of psychological or prototypical norm of most people, that you cannot shatter the illusion. And that's what Bowden was great at, was he not? I mean, he was a
storyteller.
Everything was a story, even if it was just about himself. And as soon
why doesn't this chap answer the question? Why don't you want to know the truth about it? I genuinely want to know. Honestly, I'm waiting for you to answer, rather than say I should be a psychiatrist. Why don't you want to know? Tell me. I want to understand you.
We have this discussion with people a lot. Yes.
That's appeal to motive and appeal to insult, isn't it? So there's no answer. It's a deeply visceral thing that he's not prepared. It's fascinating though. Why? Because that's the one thing that's surprised, and it was predicted actually when I was writing. I won't bother checking anymore. It's obviously quite silly. But when I was writing it, it was Nick Griffin actually. Now he's trying to talk. It's just an emotional person. But who said this will happen if you write this, and there's going to be a portion of people that are going to engage in performative outrage about it. And what I didn't expect was people coming to me saying, "Oh, don't you know I'm his real special friend?" And these people that are saying they're his friends, i.e., the people that he left all his property to, they're not his real friends. I'm his real special friend, and you don't know who I am. Well, that's just fantasy, isn't it? It's very odd.
I think in a certain respect, if you're involved in what we do, you either exist and subject to your audience, or your audience lives and sort of subject to you.
Yeah.
And I think that Bowden was a man who made you subject to him. I would like to think that the way we do our streams, maybe we talk about things every once in a while that bring people around or bring new faces on or whatever else, but we are trying to subject people to something.
Yeah, we're trying not to tell people a comforting lie.
What a lot of people seem to be deathly afraid of, which is surprising given the fact that we exist in a sphere of politics that is outside the norm. And it's about being edgy. It's about standing out from the crowd. That people are terrified to take on board alternative opinions, alternative criticisms, because they worry what the audience will think of them. And surely everything that we should aspire to, especially people who look up to what I think Bowden was trying to sort of emulate, that we don't care for popularity. We don't care about something being publicly acceptable. It's about, as you say, whether or not it's true, or it's something that we can garner something from.
We're not people who pretend to know Jonathan Bowden. We've known him from a distance, really ironically only heard of him properly after he was dead, as most people did. But he is a fascinating figure that many of us who are in the alternative spaces of politics thought was very underappreciated. And we've got you on here because we're extremely glad to see your biography of Bowden, because it is, as far as I get someone who likes Bowden, I don't understand how anyone could really object to it. I can understand if somebody had a different viewpoint on him, but in terms of the research you've done and the way it's been structured, there's not too much objectionable in there really at all.
Yeah, I mean, they object to they take the view. I mean, when I was interviewing Adrian Davis about 3 years, was it 3 years ago, on the Jolly Heretic, all he was doing was stating facts about his relationship with Bowden. Okay, yeah. And some twit said, "Oi, stop it with the what was it? Did he say stop it with the Bowden bashing or something like this?" And he was very shocked by this. He couldn't believe it, and he couldn't understand it either. He said, "How am I bashing him? He's my friend, and I am reporting the qualities of him, the good things about him. That he was a laugh a minute, that he was very intelligent, that he was very creative, that he was very talented in various ways, and I am reporting the other side of him." And that's what a biography does. If it doesn't do that, it's what's called a hagiography.
Mm.
And it's not really of that much use, except as a part of a sort of a religious group or something, and helping to hold together that religious group. And I had the same reaction when I wrote about J. Philippe Rushton. I wrote a biography of him, and I've stated what other people said about him. And this is then a character assassination. I mean, it's quite interesting in terms of the psychology of it, really. I suppose certain people make a person whom they adore or whom they look up to part of their sense of self. They are a supporter of, I don't know, Liverpool Football Club, or they're a supporter of Bowden, and they feel good about Bowden. They've become attached to him. He is part of how they make sense of the world. They are a Bowden person. And so if you criticize him in any way, you're criticizing them. And if they're deeply insecure, then they will get upset about that, and they will react and sort of shoot the messenger, sort of thing. And that's the best I can see about it. And the same, and also they will feel gold. They will feel if they've idolized someone and thought they're great, then they will feel gold, and then they will feel that they're maybe not as brilliant as they thought they were. If you highlight these problems, and I kind of knew this would happen, but it's basically the stupidity of some people on the far right just never ceases to amaze me. But then, I mean, that's really.
We can't know about Bowden's family life because that's too revealing, but let's worship anonymized Mishlings on Twitter anyway. Why not?
It seems a bit odd, but for those, thank you for the donation there, current year as well. I've got my copy. You can get your copies from, they're off for sale from Imperium Press, aren't they? They're also available on Amazon.
Yes, if you are in the UK.
Yes.
It's the purity signalling. It's like when you came on my show, Evelyn, and there was this visceral reaction from people who were just online anonymous types of, oh, I am so much more based and right wing and pure than Ed is because Ed had a troon on the show, and you had this whole online mobbing about this, where people always anonymous people would purity signal on the basis of, oh, you must be being paid by the Jews because you had a troon on the show, and then feel better about themselves.
Thank you for those shekels, of course.
Yes, thank you for your shekel sharing.
The shekels were spread far and wide and achieved many things.
To answer your question about why people don't want the truth, I think the issue with some of the... I think there's a certain type of person, especially, who physically cannot absorb Bowden speeches in the same way they can't absorb videos like this. I've come to understand that a certain section of the audience simply wants to hear you make based noises in a way that they consider vaguely entertaining, and that really they're not listening to you.
And if you let that become your shtick, you basically become controlled by your audience.
That's why you get, that's what the leftist video essay is about. Because you watch these sometimes. I'll put them on just to see what certain people make, and I'll be like, wow, this is awful. This doesn't hang together. It's not that it's badly researched. It's also just not internally consistent. But most people don't notice that. They just let the words wash over them. And that's really, I think, the essence of mass politics. And that Bowden is not someone who, apart from when he got involved in the BNP and electoral policy, he's not someone really who is in favour of the mass man and mass politics. He understands that not everybody will be able to get what he's talking about, and that is okay.
Yeah, one of the things that there was it was the first ever. There've only been 2 academic articles on Bowden. It was the first of these that was written, among others, by a guy called J.P. Zucchetto, who researches the far right. And he made the point that there was a broad social array of people that would go to things like the London Forum or the New Right Forum, ranging from barristers and highly educated people to just ordinary chaps. And I guess he tried to pitch it somewhere in the middle. I don't know, but yeah, he took the view that it's okay that different people have different roles, and not everybody can be expected to understand some of this stuff. So I think that's probably true. Yeah.
Well, if everyone understood Bowden would be a lesser man.
Possibly, yes.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's fair enough. But he was. There has to be a mystery about him, and I think perhaps he likes to maintain that mystery, and perhaps that's the problem. The biography takes away some of the mystery, but on the other hand, it kind of doesn't, because we can't know. We don't know much about his childhood. We don't know much about his most formative times, and obviously we don't have his diaries because we don't know that. But so there's still some element of mystery there, I think.
Well, of course, we are subject to one of the oldest mysteries that exists, and that's time.
Yes.
So I just want to say quickly thank you to the people who've showed up from this stream, whether you're a regular viewer of us or you've come across because Edward has joined us this evening. Please go and interact with the stream and comment and stuff, because at the end of the day, that means more people get to see this.
Do dance to Al Gore's rhythm.
Oh, yes, and tell us how much you love the nation of Israel. Do you have anything you want to wrap up on, I should say?
Well, people are asking me what my favourite Bowden speech is, so my answer is Credo.
Ooh.
Credo is...
It's got to be Vanguardism for me, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm very much a Credo fan. God, it's like Wizard and Chips. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I just the book is the book. Here's the book. The book's available on Amazon and on and such like places. Just arrived yesterday. My author copies. It's weird. You write it, and then it's like your baby, and you send it out into the world, and then other people have copies of it before you do.
It's been sitting in the incubator.
Yeah.
It takes weeks and weeks for it to be sent to Finland. So So yeah, so that's that, and I hope it's of interest, and I've done him justice.
Well, I think you have, and even as someone who I think has a relatively strong understanding of Bowden, I've learned stuff from that book. I think if there was people out there who are worried that it was just going to be a collection of things that they might have already known about him, by no means that's what you're getting. And I think they should, even if maybe they disagree with it, open themselves up to the interpretation that you have of him and his character, and more specifically his mind, because if you can't see all of that in one and how that relates to Bowden, I don't think you'll ever truly understand what he said.
Yes.
And I think that's I think that's basically all from us this evening. So if you've no more else to add, thank you once again, or I say thank you once again. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully we speak again at some point soon.
Yes.
Thanks a lot. Nice to see you. Bye bye.
See ya.
There we go. We are off air. The reason you couldn't see this chat